My name is Emily, and I was 18 when the event that changed my life happened. I've lived most of my life in the countryside, far from the noise of the city, where the fields stretch endlessly and the horizon blurs into the sky. My parents had recently moved our family to a remote farm, a cluster of 7 small houses along a single winding road. The isolation was peaceful most of the time, but it also carried a weight, a sense that the world outside was almost too quiet. That night, I was alone at home with our dog, Max, a large Labrador who had been my silent companion since childhood. My parents had gone to visit a relative, leaving me in charge until morning. The house was dimly lit and the soft hum of the TV barely filled the empty space. I had curled up on the old sofa upstairs, half asleep, letting the warmth of the blanket and Max's steady breathing lull me into calm. But then, it happened. 3 knocks. Sharp, deliberate, and unrelenting, smashed the silence like a hammer against glass. My pulse skyrocketed. Max shot up from his bed, growling with a deep, warning rumble. His fur bristled as he bolted to the door, planting himself between me and the unknown outside. I froze, listening. The courtyard below was nothing but darkness, swallowed by the night. No lights, no movement, no hint of human presence. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor playing a prank, maybe an animal. But the weight in my chest told me this was neither. There was something deliberate about those knocks, a presence that was both patient and purposeful. I tried to calm Max, whispering to him as his growls shook the floorboards. The silence returned, thicker this time, almost watching me, waiting. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, to run, to call for help. But curiosity and fear kept me glued to the stairwell. I had to know. Slowly, I descended, step by step, my ears straining for the slightest sound. Each creak of the stairs felt amplified in the stillness. My hands trembled as I reached for the door, heart hammering against my ribcage. When I leaned my head outside, peering into the dark courtyard, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. No footprints, no shadows, no lights, just the cold air brushing my face and Max growling at the invisible. Whoever or whatever had knocked had vanished. That moment, suspended between relief and terror, set the tone for the night that would never leave me. I forced myself to take a step forward, and Max's growls deepened, vibrating through the wooden floor. Every hair on his back stood on end, and I realized that he wasn't barking at anything visible. He was sensing something I could not see. My fingers shook as I twisted the doorknob, the cold metal slipping slightly under my grip. Slowly, almost unwillingly, I pulled the door open, just enough to peer into the yard. The courtyard stretched before me, black as ink, interrupted only by the faint silhouette of the barns and the distant outline of the other houses. I strained my eyes, expecting to catch even the slightest movement, a shadow fleeing in the night, anything that would explain the knocks. But the darkness was complete, suffocating, and absolute. The gravel under the porch was undisturbed. No footprints, no marks, nothing that suggested someone had been there at all. I stepped out, my bare feet brushing against the cold, damp stone of the porch, Max darting in front of me like a protective shadow. My pulse pounded in my ears. I called out again, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound firm. "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. Only the whisper of the wind through the trees answered me, though it barely moved. It felt almost wrong, as if even the wind knew to stay quiet. The air seemed heavier here, dense, almost tangible, pressing against my chest. I could feel Max's anxiety radiating through his tense muscles. He refused to move beyond a few steps from the door. The shadows of the barns seemed to shift slightly, as if the darkness itself was breathing. I felt an icy brush against my skin, though the night was still. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, yet my feet remained glued to the spot. My mind ran in circles. What if someone is hiding? What if it's dangerous? Each thought was accompanied by the unnerving certainty that no ordinary person would behave like this, knocking and then vanishing completely into the black. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The stillness was overwhelming, punctuated only by the soft shuffle of Max's paws as he adjusted his stance. I finally allowed myself to step back inside, closing the door slowly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was still out there, waiting, just beyond my sight. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak in the house and every whisper of wind outside set my nerves on fire. The knocks had only been the beginning, a silent warning that some presence had chosen to enter my life, and it would not leave. I locked the door, then checked it again and again. Every window, every latch, every possible way in or out of the house. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Max followed me closely, his nails clicking softly against the floor, his eyes never leaving the staircase or the dark hallway beyond it. I called my parents, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what had happened. They listened in silence, then told me they would call our nearest neighbors immediately. The waiting was unbearable. Every minute stretched unnaturally long, as if time itself had slowed inside the house. I sat on the couch upstairs, lights fully on now, the TV muted. I wasn't watching anything, I was listening. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place I was borrowing, temporarily, while something else decided whether to reveal itself. When the neighbors arrived, their headlights cut through the darkness like a brief moment of relief. I watched from the upstairs window as they walked around the barns, flashlights sweeping over the gravel, the wooden walls, the open fields beyond. I wanted them to find something, anything, because the idea that there was nothing at all was far more terrifying. 10 minutes later, they returned. Their faces were serious, tighter than I expected. They said they hadn't found a single trace of anyone. No footprints, no broken gravel, no signs of disturbance. Then came the part that unsettled me most. They insisted I come with them and sleep in their guest room for the night. Not casually, not politely. They insisted with a quiet urgency, as if they knew something they weren't saying out loud. I refused. I told them I couldn't leave Max alone. That was the truth, but not the whole truth. Deep down, I was afraid that leaving the house would mean something else taking my place. Before they left, they made me promise to call immediately if I heard or saw anything else, no matter how small. The rest of the night passed in fragments. I didn't sleep. I dozed in short, broken moments, jolting awake at every sound. At one point, close to dawn, Max suddenly lifted his head and stared at the front door. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just watched it, frozen, as if listening to something I could not hear. That quiet, focused attention terrified me more than the barking ever had. By morning, I knew one thing for certain, that whatever knocked on that door had not left when the night ended. When my parents returned the next day, the house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I watched them move through the rooms, laughing softly, brushing off my story as unsettling but probably harmless. Still, I noticed how quickly my father began installing surveillance cameras around the property, especially one aimed directly at the front door. He said it was just to make me feel safer. I didn't argue. I wasn't sure safety was possible anymore. Life went on, at least on the surface. Weeks passed, then months. I returned to my routines, my work, my evenings alone at home with Max. But something had changed inside me. I no longer enjoyed silence. Silence now felt crowded. At night, I avoided sitting upstairs near the staircase. I kept lights on longer than necessary, and sometimes, always late, always when the house was still, I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Not from a window, not from outside, from somewhere closer. Max changed too. He refused to sleep downstairs anymore. Every night he positioned himself at the top of the stairs, facing the front door, ears alert, body tense. Sometimes he would growl softly for no reason I could see. When I checked the camera footage, there was nothing. No movement, no shadows, just the empty courtyard and the quiet gravel. Months later, during my parents' 25th anniversary, I found myself talking with our neighbor female. I thanked her again for coming that night, trying to sound casual. That's when her smile faded. She hesitated, then told me there was something she had never said before, something she wasn't sure I should know. She explained that shortly before my parents called her that night, she had been outside with her horses. The yard had been unnaturally still. Then she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, crunching through the gravel of our courtyard. She waited, expecting them to continue, but they stopped, right there. She never heard them leave.
As she spoke, a cold realization settled deep in my chest. The knocking hadn't been the beginning. It had been the announcement. Whatever walked into our yard that night hadn't been passing through. It had arrived, and it somehow had stayed. Since that night, the house has never felt empty. Every creak, every shadow, even the faintest breeze feels amplified, as if it carries an awareness I cannot see. Max still patrols the staircase, unyielding, eyes darting to the front door at the slightest sound. I sometimes swear I see the faint outline of a figure beyond the glass, but when I blink, nothing is there. I've tried to convince myself it was a trick of my mind. Fear can play cruel games. Yet, every time I recount the events to someone, my friends, my family, they notice it too. The atmosphere of the house, the subtle tension that lingers like a scent